Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to you guys. How are you guys doing? It's a lovely day outside. No, I'm joking. It's actually raining. But you know what? It's my birthday. I'm 35 years old today. And I thought, well, kicking off the day by doing what I like the most, coding. And it would be nice to code with you guys. So welcome. Let me see what happened earlier. We had some activity in the previous offline. Let me just see what happened here. I think it's Himic41. Thank you so much for the follow. That's like a few days ago. Doesn't matter. .NET Dev a couple of days ago as well. Thank you so much for the follow. And just now, how do I say this? Karimaf, Garjimfa. Thank you so much. If I have pronounced your name incorrectly, please help me because I'm not good with names. So today, it's a bit impromptu. I wasn't planning on streaming, but I'm here. It's morning in the Netherlands, and I thought, well, I'm going to spend an hour and a half on this little project that I called Codename Armor. That is mainly used to generate Azure ARM templates. If you don't know what Azure ARM is, I can quickly help you out. I can quickly, let me see. Azure ARM. Put this in this in the chat. Oh, this is not a. This is basically Azure ARM templates. And it's the basis of what we're going to be working on today. It's called Armor. Codename Armor is the little tool name. And it creates this kind of template. So it's like a JSON template for our cloud deployments. But I'm going to take it a little step further for all our other friends using AWS or Google Cloud. The main idea for this is to also generate CloudFormation or Google. What is Google's provider? The Google provisioning service in that format as well. So, but it generates it from C#. So it's mainly targeted at .NET developers. F# and C# developers. VB can also party on with us. But the main idea is this is targeted as or for .NET developers. So as a .NET developer, you can create these templates very quickly. And when you run this application, it will spit out your ARM template, which you can choose to use further if you want to, or you can continue using the tool and make changes within the tool, and it will change the template as you move on. But at some point, if you decide to say, you know what, I'm not going to be using this tool anymore, you can just continue to use the generated ARM template and modify that from there on. There's no locking. The idea is not to sort of lock it in as a vendor login or something. Raphael TY, thank you so much for the good wishes. Welcome, sir or ma'am. I have Raphael TY, I said that correctly. Yes. So welcome so much, well, very welcome to my stream. I'm just getting started, but thank you so much for that wonderful wishes. I'm a big 35 today, so I'm still young, I would say. You know, I'm getting my little beard going, and I think, you know what, I'm actually going to give myself a little capuchin for my birthday. Why not? But thank you for joining the show. We can continue with some coding today, and before we move on, I think I'm going to maybe just change the music a bit, just a tad, to see if we can listen to some chill vibes. I think this is chill vibes. Let's just see. This should be fine, right? There we go. And I'm quickly going to pop over to the screen because the main idea for this, I'm just going to call it Armor for now, but I'm just like it's like a running title that I'm trying to still figure out what it needs to be called. Any suggestions would be wonderful in the chat. If you can give me a great name, I will be forever grateful. And we will think about a prize, but let's just see if we can get some names going onto this chat, some ideas. But let me first show you what it's all about, and then maybe we can do some spitballing together to see if we can gather a good name together, you know? So anyway, so Armor, the main idea about Armor, it will spit out this ARM template. Which is Azure ARM templates. And if you go and take a look at the documentation of Azure ARM and what it does, it provisions cloud infrastructure. So in this ARM template, like a JSON file, you would define your resources. All right. So I would go, for example, look for. Let's actually go through this. You've got a couple of things. You can give parameters to it. You can define variables. You can have your own inline functions, and you can define your resources. Now, each resource that you define contains these properties, or can contain these properties. You know, it's condition, API version, and I'm not going to go into so much detail about this. Feel free to read the documentation. But the idea is, Azure templates. Let's go for a example. Let's maybe go and provision. If you guys are familiar with Azure, you will notice that there's a lot of templates here. Let's go web app. There we go. Okay, there's a basic web app. Alright, so this is an example of a Azure ARM template. So in this case, we define a couple of parameters like web app name, SKU, and the location, for instance. And these are the parameters that you can give the template when you run it, right? And you give your parameters file and your templates file to Azure, and it will deploy according to the specification that you just specified. So in this case, it's web app and SKU, which is the kind of type of plan of the web app, a location, because everything needs to run on a certain data center location, and a couple of variables that we're going to be using within this portal. So think about this is exactly like programming variables, but it's more declarative in this sense. And then you have two resources. You have your app service plan, that's your server, you would say. It has a certain SKU and a location. You can say it's a server farm, you know. And then you have your actual application infrastructure, which is your website that you also deploy it. And very important is that you define, it depends on, to say, when I deploy this item needs to wait for the previous item, which means it needs to wait for the server farm's app service plan name, which is this one. It's going to wait for that one to deploy first, and then it will go and continue this one. Otherwise, it will try and deploy these two items simultaneously. And then how do you link it? Well, you link it by using a property, a server farm ID, and that's how you map your application to a server farm. And that's how you kind of run with it. And a unit of scale in this instance is a app service plan. It doesn't scale on a website level, it scales on a VM level or an app service plan level. So that's the crux of this whole thing. So I was thinking, showing a bit of Armor today, maybe we can build onto Armor. But first, I'm going to be taking like quite a step back because I've learned some cool things in a couple of weeks regarding the builder pattern. And the idea of Armor is it is built on top of the builder pattern. Alright, so the builder pattern is simple. So we can just have an example like this. And I think this is, let's actually do the same. So let's do the same thing that we've done previously. So I'm just going to get rid of these consts for now. Actually, let's get rid of everything. Yeah. So the main idea is how do we start using Armor? So we have a couple of things. We install the idea is we install a NuGet package, and we start off with saying Azure dot, and then we have create. Right? That's the first thing, and this is exactly what the builder pattern is. You call Initializer, which is I would say maybe a director or something that creates an instance. In this case, it creates a Azure Resource Manager template builder. And then what that exposes is a couple of things. So it gives you helper functions to mutate the object. So as you can see, it's got API profiles, got content version, functions, parameters, resources. It literally describes the template, but it's in code. So in our case, if we wanted to, for instance, change or generate something like this, let's do that. Let's create a parameter. So let's say parameters, and then in here we have a parameter builder, right? So that we can define a couple of parameters. So let's do that. I wonder if we can. Yeah, let's go p, and we say p dot, and then it pops up with different things. So then we can say p dot array bool. So in this case we want a string, and the name of the parameter. So in our case here, the parameter name is web app name. All right, so we just call it web. Oops, I think that's wrong. Go web app name. Here we go. And furthermore, this thing has a description. So it's a type of string that's inferred from the method here. So it's a string parameter. But if we want to define more things to this whole thing, we can build it further on. So we can say, you know what, this is a. I wonder if we can do this much better. Let us see. I'm going to do underscore here, just to. Okay. So then we can say, you know, p is p dot allowed values build. We can do all these kind of things now. We can add a description to it, for instance. So in our case, we have a metadata, which is description. We're just going to copy this guy, for instance. All right. Then we can say, you know what, this is the description, but let's just do this for now. We don't have to, but we can just do for brevity description, and we give it a description. All right, so there we go. That's a description, and a minimum length of 2. So that's the minimum length. So we go minimum length of 2, right? So that's the idea, that you define your parameters like that. And the cool thing about C# is there's many ways of skinning a cat. So I like to maybe do a couple of things. I would like to use a non-bodied. Let me just see if I can get this right. Control. Oh, where is it now? Still pass that in. Let's go. take the curly brackets out. Not always necessary, you know. And you go dot there, take that one out. Dot there, take that one out. And take that one out like that. That's maybe a tad more readable. And do the same thing for parameters. Like that. There we go. Okay, so that's the parameters. Of course, at the end we need to sort of have a semicolon in there. So that's the idea. So let's say we want to create a new. Let's do that. Let's say we want to create a new one, which is skew. So it's a string. We call it skew. And the same goes. So the default value is S1. So we can go P is P, and then we say the default value. Oops, not default value. Come on, what's happening? Default value is S1. All right. And then we have another one like the description. The default value is used when you don't have a parameter passed in. It will kind of go for the default value there. Let me say description. And there it is, a description. I've got some activity on the stream. Rafael asks DV right. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Maybe just elaborate a bit more, and then we can jump in and help each other out. Then we have location. Now the main idea of this is, if you don't specify specifically in Armor, for Azure IRM, if you do the things from scratch or not using Armor, you have to specify location. But if you're doing Armor or using this tool, it infers a couple of things. So it will it will pre-populate the location as your resource group location, which is quite cool, you know. It can infer API versions and a lot of things you don't have to actually explicitly define. But if you do want to define them, you can. And that's the beauty of it. You can override the defaults that is built into Armor. Rafael says if you have default value, write dv. Now that's interesting. I'm going to see if that works. dv. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that tip. Pro tip, guys, if you want to, and I think that works on the initial caps, right? So if you have something like, let's say the thing is foo bar. So let's take, for instance, max length. So if I go max length, that, or min length, how would that work then? So it will go on the initial caps. That's interesting. I haven't it's something I haven't learned before. So here we go. That's the description. That's a cool tip. Thank you so much. Location. And I think we need to end that one there. And we can go location. And also that's also a string. And the location name is, we just call this location. And we're going to make this default value. Now we can specify this as the default value. So let's do that little trick that we've just learned. P, P, and then we say, oops, say default value. Right, that works awesome. You could do this. Oops. You could do this. Nothing wrong with doing that, right? But because we are in C# land, you can do things like, you want to be, because obviously if you make a spelling mistake, anything can happen. It won't stop the build, right? And I can prove it. So this thing, if I build it, it will build, right? It won't break at all, right? But it will fail on deploy, which is not really what we want, right? So magic strings are evil, I would say normally. So what you can do is you can go resource group, it's a little helper thing, dot location, right? And that will give you a dynamic string, which is just a string, right? And that will just generate this exact same thing. So now when you actually, just to prove this builds, see that builds, but when you make it a spelling mistake now, it will actually say something else is wrong, which is a kind of a positive thing using this approach, right? Metadata. So we're going to be using location for all resources. Let's just say that. Dot description. Oops. Description, and we say that's the metadata for all the location for all resources. Now let's define some variables. Now it's the same pattern going forward, the same pattern. So we have the first variable name is web app portal name. Just get rid of a couple of brackets here that we're not being using. I think that's that. And let's end that one there. Okay, so now let's define variables. It requires us to pass in a variable builder. So in this case, it is provided. We can just say dot define, and we say that's the name, and the value we can say is that, right? So that's the exact same value that we want. Just wanna what's happening? Oops. Something else is happening here. Oh, like that. So there we go. Oh, come on. Why is this thing? There we go. Alright, so that is the variables. But yet again, you can make a spelling mistake there, right? Or you can make a spelling mistake there, no? And it will fail on deploy. And guess what? We have a helper for that. So we can say concat, and then it allows you to pass in concatenation of things. It works exactly the same as the concat function in Azure. So in our case, we have parameters, which, well, it's called parameters. The name, and we can say the name is web app name, this one, and we need to suffix that with a dash web app. Alright, so we can go comma, and oh, I need to put that in quotes like that. There we have a definition. So there's the concat function. And by the way, how do you define these functions? It turns out if you using static Armor Azure functions, which is a static class, it will pull down these static functions. Otherwise you would define functions dot concat or functions dot parameters the whole time. Which you can also do, but this is just more readable, I would say. Also note it's not lowercase, like the template. I did actually think about maybe making it lowercase to be more readable or more army, but I decided to go for the uppercase because it's more like a C# way of doing things. Right, so, oh, by the way, if you want to duplicate a line in VS, you can Control D and it will duplicate that line. So that's what I've just done now. Control D, I duplicated that whole line. Another variable that we define is app service plan name. And the same goes for that. So we have app service plan. Oops. We want to concatenate app service plan. And we want to concatenate that with, or that's dash. So we need to go dash. And we want to say concatenate that with a web app name that we've defined. And then we can go copy this guy. No, it's already there, so that's fine. Take this out. I think take that out. We should be fine. Right. I think that's good. Moving on to the resources. Now this is interesting. The resources each have a version, right? And a type and a kind. And if you take a look at the documentation, it's kind of vague. Sometimes a version is needed, sometimes not. Sometimes a kind is needed. Properties, all that kind of things, because specifically to the type of resources, you need to specify certain properties. Otherwise, it will fail, right? And it requires you to know a lot of things about Azure. .NET developers shouldn't really, well, they should know about Azure, but in my mind, you should be caring about your application infrastructure, a lot less about what's out there, right? If they make a change on a different version, you shouldn't be caring. And that's the idea of this tool or framework, is to kind of guide you in the right direction. So what we have is, let's just close that thing there. I think that's the variables for now. What I do actually like about this syntax is the fact that I can give it, I can collapse it, right? So I can actually do this kind of thing. All right. And then you can actually collapse your, which is the same as ARM, also has that thing, the JSON. Right, so we can collapse that one for now, and then let's say we also wanna, or you could also use regions, that's also an idea. Let's see, put that in there, and then put that in there, and that should be fine, like that. We can also minimize that. Right, so now next we need to define resources. And guess what? Resources work exactly the same way. We need to define an action for that. So in this case, oh, what's wrong with my typing today? Let's say that, and we say, okay, great. So now we need to define. Now that's one of the things I have not actually worked out yet, but we have app service and we have app service plan. But note, this version of the code is using a mix of extension methods and normal methods. If you don't know what extension methods are, it extends a certain type and it's got an interesting signature. So in this case, I have an app service and app service plan, right? And maybe this is a good example to show you how a builder works, right? So if I go app service plan and I open this guy up like this, it needs to answer me, or it asks me for a name. So in this case, the name is my app service plan name. If I take a look at, I can use the variables app service plan name. Yet again, I've got a variables, that. And guess what? We have a builder. Then we can say, you know what, builder, give me a SKU, and the SKU needs to be the parameter SKU. So will this work? Yes. So this will be the parameters SKU name that we defined. I think it's in parameters here, right? So it's lowercase though, SKU, like that. That's the kind of the idea. That's the app service plan, right? I did not define a version. I did not define, oh, that's this one. I did not define the kind or the location. Well, the location I could define as well, so that I can do in a builder. So I can say plan is plan dot location. Locations, is that even a thing? Oh, that's not, that's in the SKU. I want to be here. Right, so let's say location. Location is not here. Location is not there, but I know why. I know, but let's just leave location out of the equation for now. You get the drift. of how this works. All right. Next, we need to define a app service plan. So we can go. Well, this one is not. Oh, actually interesting. So let's return this like that, and that will work. Let me just see what is in here. No. So next, I want to define an app service. Just want to put that in there. Same goes for the app service. So I need it to have a name, so which is the site, which is the web app portal name. So it's called is it variables. Yeah, the variables web app portal name, and then it's got a couple of things. Yeah, in this case, it's got a location again. Let's define that. So we say site is site, for instance, and then we say dot. What do we have? We can define a kind, but it's not needed. We can go server plan, server farm, and then we can say the server farm is actually the variable of the server farm name. In there like that. Then in this case we have a location. We have a location, and the location is our parameters location. So it's parameters dot or bracket location. This is the location we pass in to our ARM template. And then we can do a depends on, which is important. And depends on. And then here we can, yet again, we can take this whole string like this. And we can do that, put that in there, oops. Put that whole thing in there. And that's also perfectly fine. All right. But the thing is, let me just see. I need to put a bracket here or something. Let's do semicolon there. I need another one. There we go. Right, so yet again, hey Martin van Stam, thank you so much for the good wishes. Welcome to the channel again. It's nice seeing you around. For some reason your name is pink. I don't know if that was, I'm just joking. Pink is also a nice color. Welcome to the show, sir. Let me see. So I have, this depends on. Now that's also a string, but guess what? We have a resource. Well, we have a helper for that. So if I go id dot app service plan, guess what? We need to define a name. So this part will basically generate this. Then we can go further and say, you know what, variables, and it's the app service plan name. Like so. Okay, so, and it's actually shorter, you know, doing this generates this at the end of the day. So what are we working on here? Yes, I still need to do the Bang project thing, but I'm actually working on Armor, or codename Armor. It's my ARM generator for .NET. And it's not just for Azure, it's for AWS, for Google, for maybe for Alibaba, we'll see. But the idea is to write ARM templates to deploy and to generate your infrastructure as code templates that you can use your cloud provider of choice and deploy them. Or maybe just deploy it directly from code as well. That's also possible. So what do we have here? We have that. I think we need to end that with a bracket and a semicolon. Let's see. Boom. I think that's fine, right? Do I have one too much? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. That is it, right? So I have my little ARM template here. So I'm gonna minimize that. Next thing we need to do is we need to say build, because we're building an ARM template, right? So the thing about build, it takes all these things that we've defined and it creates an ARM template for it. And then having said that, then we can go run. So we can run. So when this application executes, I'm actually executing this whole thing. So in essence, whenever I go run, I can do things. So in this case, I get an action, which is a deployment template. So it's T for in this case. And then I can say console.writeLine, for instance, T. Let's just do that. Control KD, I think. So we have Azure create parameters, variables, resources, then we build it, and when it runs, I want to output that deployment template, which is basically a deployment template that has a file name. That's it. You don't know what it is because it's a deployment template. You shouldn't really care at this stage. And hopefully, when I run this, it should spit out an ARM template for me, if I've done my coding correctly. Let's just run and see what happens. Look at that. So it spit it out, this whole thing. So let's see where it's different. I'm going to copy this in. Do we have a diff tool? I think VS Code has a diff tool. I'm not mistaken. How do we do a diff in VS Code? Nope, that's control dot maybe. What? Shift? I have no idea. Let's go see. A diff VS Code. There should be a tool for diff and diff VS Code there. Select for compare. Okay. Let's create a new file. This is a JSON file. We save this as, let's just maybe save this in a sandbox. We call this armor.json. That was generated by the armor templates, right? And a new file, we're going to say whatever was generated here. That's Azure. Oh, this is not what we want. Boom. I think this is it. JSON. We save this as sample.json. So the sample was a given, and we want to compare it to armor that was generated. And how do we do this? We can go. Oh, compare selected. That's easy enough. Right. So let's see. I think that's just the order that's different here. But we have a mint link 2, which is mint link 2. The rest is the same. The default value is 1. Armor has a space there where the sample does not have a space. The rest is actually the same. I think the reason why it's different here is because the order yet again. The kind is an app. Kind is not generated in this case. So I don't know what the bug is there, but we'll fix it now. Skew, everything is there, and capacity is 0. We need to define a capacity. Actually, that's something we missed actually in here. So let's say skew is skew. Say capacity is 0. Let's just make it 0, just because because it needs capacity. Let's go here again, and I think if we go here, paste, save, it has a capacity, so that's fine. Didn't I just do that? Compare. Okay, so we have default value of everything there. capacity. Where am I now here? Why is the capacity not... What? I'm sure this thing had a capacity. Oh, didn't it? What am I missing? I'm missing something. I'm totally missing something. Okay, it did not have a capacity. But in any case, you get the drift. So the reason why this is not really behaving as it should be behaving is because I've refactored it to use a builder pattern instead of the extension method, which is similar. If we take a look at a code between this one, do you see the little... Can this work if I just maybe zoom in a bit? Maybe... Oh, that does not work. Nope. Do you see the little icon? It's got a little pink icon with an arrow down. Alright, so that's the little that's the extension method. If you compare it to the normal one, so it's got a normal pink box without an arrow down. So that's a difference between a normal function and an extension method, or normal method and extension method. And I've refactored it to be an extension method, or from an extension method to be a normal method. It's crazy. So the extension method, it extends something. So you can pass in this. Oh, by the way, it needs to be first in a static class. Any static class you want, that needs to be public. Then you define it as public static and the return type, and give it a name, and then you need to say this. That's the thing you're extending. So in this case, we are extending a services builder helper, and then the rest of your parameters. So in this case, we're just like giving a few things, and then we're returning it, which is great, but it's not really the way I want it. Whereby if you compare it to the app service one, your web sites app service. This is okay. It's the resource. That's not the builder. We need to go to the builder. This one. So it has a few things. It implements iServices builder, but also it has this resources builder, and it's in a partial class, right? Because the resources, if we F12, that's the main one that you see, right? With resources and build and all that kind of things, because it's a builder. But we want to extend that, and we want to be able to extend that out of the assembly as well. So the idea is to make it a partial class. It needs to be in the same namespace as well. So remember that. So we have a public partial class with the same name, resources builder, and it will extend that with a method app service. And we implement this little part. We implement an app service definition, which is this, right? So let's start there. Let's create a, let's actually copy this code, because I like copying code rather than writing code. We can actually copy this whole thing. On top there, resources builder. In this case, we don't want it to be an app service definition. We want it to be a, did I have a, oh, this is interesting. So this is the definition of what the what the app service plan needs to look like, or the extension needs to look like. Do I have it? App service definition? No, I don't. Let's actually also copy this one. It would be cool to generate this code as well. App service definition. So let's go and rename this to app service plan definition, right? And it needs to it needs to give me back a resource builder, and I want to call this app service plan, or maybe we should make it a server farm. I don't know. Let's just follow that, and it gives you an iApp service builder. So in this case, it's iApp service builder plan, app service plan builder. Do I have it here? iApp service plan builder. And that should be fine, right? So, oops. Yeah, that's fine. I need to include that. Alright, so it already has an app service plan definition. That's interesting. App service plan. Does it? I don't see it. I don't see that definition. Where is that? 12? Okay, so... Okay. It kind of control dotted the whole thing now. Let's call that app service plan. There we go. Now we have interface to extend by, right? So just maybe clear all these other tabs. And because we need to, where are we now? We're now at app server form. We need to say it's app service plan definition. And we need to implement that. So if we go control dot, we want to implement this interface to this one, right? And we could get rid of a few things. So what we can do is implement this guy. But before we implement it, let me go to the usage. So if you go to the program, this won't build, by the way. Let's comment this guy out. And we go to the extensions and then maybe kill this for now. Make sure everything builds. So it does not contain a method for app service plan, right? So if I F12 there, nothing happens. Okay, this is concerning. It's because the resources builder has an app service plan definition. App service plan definition, that's app service plan definition. Let's see, resources builder. Aha, okay. We also need a resources there. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. I'm sure there is. We have this. And then we also extend the interface. Resources builder with app service plan definition. Right? Now when we go back to our code, we have that function available to us. Which means we can go control dot, and you see the icons are different, right? So that's cool. That is very cool. So now that's a proper function. Even if I F12 there, it goes to the what do you call it? The control F12. Oh, that's cool. Control F12. It goes to implementation. Alright, so now we need to implement our builder. So a builder does one thing. So you create a builder and you expose certain functionality within that builder to do certain things. So if you want to change your name or mutate a email address, you have a function to do only that thing. And that thing will only mutate the object within that builder. And when you hit build, it has all the information during the mutation phases to make that object. It's better than creating a new object like foo is new foo, because that opens up a whole crux of problems. And it also forces you to create a constructor for every single permutation, which is a bit, it depends what you want to do, right? In this case, what we want to do is we want to say, just want to scroll up a bit. So var builder is a new app service plan builder. This thing that we already have, right? And what we want to do is with this builder, we want to say builder dot API version. We can give it a certain API version. And Also, we want to give it a type if we need to. I think the type is irrelevant because the type is defined in a model. Let's just give it a type. We need to give it a kind, which is kind. It's also app. Location. And then we need to invoke the action that was passed in to override the defaults. So we define the defaults now. So the API version for this was, I think this is the API version. It's the 1st of February. And the type is a server farm. Kind is an app. Location is, yet again, parameters.location. So we can use the same thing. We can go resources or parameters. Maybe we can just go functions dot parameters. No, we should not do that. No, we should not do that there. But let's define the parameter default as resource group dot location. Properties doesn't have anything, depends on doesn't have anything, and this queue doesn't have anything because there's no defaults for that, right? Cool. Then we go, we have a builder action. We go builder action. That's the builder action that was passed in. If there is something defined, dot begin, invoke. I think it's invoke like this. Give the actual builder in there. And then, because this is that's a nice thing. It's not a static class, it's an instance class. And it's a partial class of resource builder. And if you take a look at resource builder, it has a internal read-only property of resources that we can use. So in this case, we can say resources.add builder.build. Whatever you define, it will build that. And then you can say return this. And there we go. That's how it works. Maybe get rid of this reference. Okay, that's cool. And I was saying that we can either define defaults here, or we can define it within the actual object itself. So this app service plan is a resource, and it's all internal. We don't want to expose this object to the outside of the API. So we can define the defaults within the object, but I want to keep the object as dumb as possible. So only define the things that's really needed. So I won't put in logic in here to say if this, then that. You could, but I think that's more the builder's job to do that kind of thing. So we could actually take this out as well. But let's just leave that there for now. It's still in our brains. We need to see what's the best way of doing these kind of things. Right, so now we have a builder that, if you take a look at what we've built, the app service plan builder, we've inherited this from the resource builder type of resource and the type of the resource builder plan, type of the resource builder, and it also implements the app service plan builder. And this should not be what's interesting is that this builder extends the normal app service plan builder, because the normal one that we have is a resource builder. So it gives you APIs to the normal things of a normal resource. You can imagine if we have .app service plan whatever there, give it a name, and we say this is the plan, and the plan is actually, it has a skew. That's not really what we want, right? So we want something more than that, because we want to override a few things. If you take a look at the app service one, the site has API version, comments, all the basic, all the normal stuff that we can use. We want to do the same thing for App Service Plan as well. So App Service Plan Builder is this, but what's different from the other one, App Service Builder here, this inherits from iResource Builder. So we can just do the same thing. There we can say, you know, well, this is a App Service Builder, App Service Plan Builder, not to be confused. And this is where it gets interesting. So it's inconsistent availability. So we can say App Service Plan Builder, make this public. We need to find a way of not making these things public, but fine, that's maybe for a different show. But now we have availability to all the other ones. So we can, at this stage, if we're not happy with the API version of the standard App Service Plan, we can override it by going App Service Plan, I want to use a certain version, you know? That's how we can get around that issue. I think that's what we have so far. Great, so does this compile? That's the next answer we need to give it. So yet again, App Service Plan Builder is less accessible. Let's maybe make this public again. Okay, so I think somewhere the code bleeds. So we need to kind of figure out, because my main aim is to keep the resources as internal as possible. So internal means it's only accessible within this assembly. So the code can call it's there, but outside of the assembly, like the Armor sample, they shouldn't know anything about an app service or app service plan. Maybe that's a bit over engineering it, but I don't want to go like armor dot azure dot and see, for instance, a web app. I don't want to be seeing that, because that means then you can create something like, you can do that, and that kind of defies the purpose of what we're trying to do. We want to stop people from doing that, because that's the builder's job to create that object. So having said that, let's see if we can figure that out. So running the sample again, that should spit out exactly the same, what do you call it, the ARM templates, but I think what we are missing is, whoops, now come down, doing a compare again, just do that, it's armor, right, so go Control C, and that's fine, and we go compare these files. That's interesting, so we need to figure out how can we get it exactly the same. So this doesn't really matter, the ordering doesn't really matter about these kind of things, but let's just see if we maybe make it a bit better. So min length, well, type is obviously first. If we actually go back to the structure of the ARM templates here, we have schema, content version. So let's maybe see if that makes a difference. Armor here, then we can go to Azure. We're gonna check in the code quickly. Refactored from extension method to method. That's fine. Might be jumping the gun, but let me quickly show you something else. So let's say your program, for some reason, you have a multi-cloud strategy and you want to be creating 2 templates using maybe a generic model or nothing, but it's still possible, right? So then you can do something like AWS.create, right? And that will give you the same thing. Give me some resources, which is the same thing. So we can say, you know, that is, maybe do that. And that is then, I think I've got a S3 bucket in here. Give it a name. For instance, you say build dot run. And give the template. In this case, I'm just going to write it to the screen. Right line T. And the reason why T can work is because, maybe just do this. I think this is much better to doing it like this. Much quicker as well. There we go. That's go. So T is a deployment template. But what we've done is on a deployment template of AWS or Azure, doesn't matter. Just want to find it quickly. So it's a CloudFormation template that implements deployment template. We have a public override string. So whenever I give this object to a thing that needs to generate to render a string, it will call this method automatically. So this will serialize this in JSON, right? So this is what we have. We have an Azure template and an AWS template. One creating a bucket and one deploying a website. And if we scroll up, that's the CloudFormation part that will be generated. And this is the Azure part that will be generated. But let's say you want to work with YAML. It's possible, right? So you can go, I think 2 YAML or something. As YAML. There we go. And that will actually YAMLify your CloudFormation template for you. So you can do these kind of things as well. YAML is not available on Azure. Well, it is. I wonder what will happen there. It shouldn't be available on Azure because Azure doesn't understand YAML. But you could use YAML, and then you can spit out YAML like this, which is a bit more readable than JSON. It also depends on your ops, right? So the people is going to be reading these kind of templates. But if you give YAML just as it is to Azure, it will reject it. So it's supported by JSON only. But if you generate YAML, you could use something like Azure ARM YAML. I think Justin Who has created a function for it, or like a tool kind of thing. So this is his. Oh, that needs to be $1 to fix that. But in any case, you have your YAML, and then it does a. Oh wow! It's called YARM. So YARM is a YAML ARM template thingy. YARM. Azure template. I think that should be enough. Okay, so YARM source. It's like a CLI tool you can call into to create a template. I don't know where the actual sample is for this thing. But in any case, you can use something like YARM. I think this is the blog post done. So you can go YARM I input file, output file, and that's it. You create JSON. As an intermediate step, if you prefer YAML in your organization, you could use this as well. You know, to go from YAML to Azure, or you can go from C# to YAML to JSON, or you can go from C# to JSON. The possibilities are endless, and it's up to you to implement it how you want it to implement it. The world's your oyster. .NET's awesome. Okay, so what do we have? Get rid of this guy for now. We have a couple of things that we need to sort out. We need to sort out the... Let's maybe do this. Let's say create. Let's create this... what do you call it? The ordering. Very important. So kill a few things. Okay, and then we go to Azure. If I'm moving too fast, please slow me down. And hello for the folks that just joined us. Welcome to the stream. We're doing a little code to create a tool that creates Azure ARM templates from code from C#, and it will then spit out an Azure ARM template, which is JSON, or a Amazon CloudFormation template. And join us. This is a project called Armor, and it is available on GitHub. I actually want to put the thing on there, on my GitHub page, which is Armor. And it's still a running title, so if you're here and you can make up a new name for this thing, I would like to know that. Come up with a cool name, then we can use your name for this project. It's awesome. Also, it's open source. Go and do your thing and contribute to this project. I think that is cool. So where were we? We want to go to the deployment template, which is, I think, somewhere here. Martin is a cool name, but I think that's already taken, Martin. So I think that's already taken. Martin.io. Let me see. Deployment. So we have this deployment builder that creates an Azure Resource Manager template. So we have a JSON property schema, and I think here we can define the order. So the order, we say that's 0. Can it be? Okay, that's 0. Well, 1 doesn't really matter. API profile is next. I've done this before. JSON property. Now I should be using the system.text API for this, but the problem I had with that is this has a recurring function. So I just want to type this quickly. Or a 1. Because a resource has resources, it's kind of a recurring serialization. And the new .NET Core system.text API, I have a bit of trouble with doing recursion serialization, according to my knowledge. I've tried that and it's sort of blown up in my face. I'm going to stick with JSON.NET for now, but we can always change that in the future. And I think API profile is next. We'll make that explicitly 2. Parameters we have then, it's 3. Ordering does not matter, but just to for the I, 4. Functions we have 5. And then we have resources, which is 6. Outputs, that should be 7. Alright, so that's outputs, that's it. So the rest we ignore. And do the same thing. We have all these things like parameter. Right, so parameter. How do you say parameter? Oh, it's down here. We have a type, default value. Yes, type is above here, so let's make order as 1. name is irrelevant default value. Let's maybe move this up. Okay, so type is 1, default value is 2. Otherwise it will serialize it the way you define it, I believe. Then we have allowed values is 3. Min value and max value if it goes, I think that's a string parameter. String parameter, or that's the int parameter rather. I need to find it. Oh, there we go. There's all the things here. So min value. Oops. Property 1. Property 2. And then we have min length, which is all the string parameters. These guys. A couple of inheritance things there. So what we have is not that complicated really. We have array parameter base. That's your array based parameters like strings and array object arrays and stuff like that. We have certain parameters for that, or object properties for that. And for ints we have different ones, because int cannot have a minimum length, also according to documentation. So that's the way it's implemented. Then we have metadata description. In this case we have metadata is an object. That doesn't really matter, so let's just maybe say that is 4. And it's still a work in progress. Okay, so what else was different here? Let me just see, because the skew, that was that. I think min length will sort it out. We need to spend some time on the resources, because resources, this one here, the resources condition API version. So we have condition, which is that control.json in here, API version, which is 2, name or type. You see type is there, so you can do that in there. You say that is 3. And then the name, which is 4. Location 5. Oh, that depends on. Can you believe it? There we go. That's 5. And by the way, how I move the line upwards, I hold in Alt and I use the arrow keys up and down, and I can move this line up and down. It's quite cool. So that's the location. Tags. It does not have any tags here yet. So, oh, it does actually. Let's see. Oh, what am I doing? Location. And that's 6. Tags, comments. What am I doing? 7. Almost there. Almost there. Copy. I don't think copy is implemented here. No, it's not. So let's just leave it out for now. Depends on. Finally, we've got depends on. The suspense is killing me, man. Depends on properties, which is this one. So that's 9. And skew is that one there. I like this music, it's like so suspenseful. Should we do it? We should do that, rather, I would say. Kaboom, I don't have any sound effects. Skew kind, which is kind in there. Missing point. 11. I think that's plan, and then resources. Plan. So of course this is internal set, which is great. That's cool. So internal set, that's maybe a good thing. See that? It's internal set. So it means that if I want to set the location, for instance, in my application, let's say we have site is new, app service. Let's use that. And you want to say site or location. I cannot do that. That's cool. This is almost what I want, because this is a it's inaccessible, but we'll get there. We have a location, we've got a plan, we've got resources. Oops, we need to copy this to there. A lot of work still to be done on this project, but we're getting there. So now I'm going to run it again, and hopefully the order is not different. Oh, it's still YAML. Golly. So everything looks fine. Hopefully. Compare. Didn't work. What? Did it work or not? I don't think it worked. Type, default value, metadata. I don't think it's this copied, by the way. Copy. It didn't want to work. Oh, maybe the parameters. Yeah, min length should be. It rendered min length there. But you get my point. You get my point. Hopefully we can maybe fix this later on in this scenario. That's the crux of it. And what I really want to do with this whole thing is obviously when you have your application, you're going to be doing your application within a program, and then whenever your program runs, it's going to be building the ARM template and then running a runner that does stuff. Now whatever it does, you can do what you want, but it would be cool, so we can just say that's the template. Okay, we have that. But it would be cool to have something. I'm just going to comment this out for effect. But it would be cool to have something like Azure template. And then have you be able to say Azure.deploy your template. That would be cool, right? To do that. Because when you get to the run stage, instead of just throwing the ARM template on screen, which you can do as well, it will give your template to Azure to deploy. Even more, what we can do is we can then inject parameters, because obviously you would need, if you deploy Azure, you need to pass in the parameters, and these parameters can be of type iOptions parameter. And that all depends on your environment that you're running on. So execution environment. If your environment is, for instance, if your environment is, for instance, production or test, it will then pass in that parameters from your configuration file. You still define in your config, so which is still JSON or whatever you want it to be. The idea is you pass in parameters, and it will basically create, I would say, inline parameters or something for Azure, and that's the kind of idea that I want to bring home with this application. But this deploy function is not something that we would write. It's something that's it's there already. So to give you an example, we have, I think it's Azure Fluent. I think it's Azure Resource Manager Fluent API or something. I think it's this one. And I think it's a deployment or something. Deployment. Azure ARM deploy C#. There must be an example. Yeah, it's this one. This one has a function. So yes, of course we can use the Azure ARM Fluent libraries to do exactly what we're doing now. The difference is the Azure Fluent library don't generate ARM templates. It just deploys it directly. So there's no auditing or no history of what was deployed. You need to implement that yourself. If that doesn't matter to you, by all means, you can use AZCLI, or you can use PowerShell, or you can use the Azure SDK to do exactly the same thing. But we want to have Azure ARM templates, and this is focused on infrastructure as code templates specifically. But nothing stops us from using a combination of both. So in this case, we could say, Azure deployments define with this code here exactly could be in here, which is the Azure here. So Azure deployments define could actually do, oh, what's happening? Do that, if I'm not mistaken. Something like that. Okay, so Azure deployments. I'm just gonna copy it. Paste that in there. So you have Azure deployments define deployment name, which is anything you want it to be. With existing resource group, you give it a resource group name that can also come out of your configuration. Because I think what we can do is we can pass in a config in here, like an iConfiguration. And then with template, that's the template JSON, which is the actual template with parameters that you can get from the config. With mode incremental, create. That's it. And when this runs, it will deploy it. And I think we can do this in the next episode. Maybe implement this exact same thing in this extension method. So the same runner will go for AWS. AWS also has, according to my knowledge, AWS deployment C# or something. Let's just see what is here. Lambda deploy package in C. AWS toolkits. What is this? Something similar like this. Alright, so deploy some application using data. You can, this is now using some extension method. But the exact same way needs to be used for AWS and Google or Alibaba Cloud or whatever you want to do. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be committing this because I need to run. I need to catch a train somewhere. But commit this, fooling around. I'm going to sync this up. And I'm going to leave something with you guys. Please get me a cool name. Tweet me about it or something. And then we can maybe make this project awesome. And give me a thumbs up if it's a good idea. Give me a thumbs down if it's a bad idea. We should kill this project. So yeah, with that, I'm gonna go chill. I'm gonna go celebrate my birthday. I have to go get some cake to give my colleagues at work. We're gonna have some nice times. The weather is starting to clear up now, and I need to run. Before I go, actually, let's see if we can. I always forget this, so stick around quickly. We're gonna see if we can quickly what do you call it? If we can quickly raid someone, yeah. There's this one here. So who can we raid? Let's say science and technology. Oh, actually, I should share my screen, right? So let's see if we can raid someone here. Open source programming. Let's see who is here. Just stick around for a little while. Game dev and Joel. Oh, there's me. Wow. Cool. Let's rate myself. Can it? I don't think that's possible. But let's this little guy. Let's see this guy. Let's see what is this. Some ads, of course. Name is R. That one. R.W. Grimm. Let's raid R.W. Grimm. There we go. Come now.
Cool.
Oh, that's still the ad playing. Blah blah blah. Come now. How can I now? Come now. How do I R.W. Grimm? Here we go. Stick around. Let's see.
This isn't actually an attachment. Image is gonna live over on GitHub. Yeah. Okay. How do I attach a file to a GitHub issue? Or is this another thing you just can't do?
Okay, so I'm gonna leave you guys with him. Oh, right now I forgot to choose the button. There we go.
Attach files by drag and dropping or selecting, pasting them. So, Manny renders. Thank you for the thank you for the raid.
Let's.
That I know. We'll give you a shout out. So thank you for the raid. Glad to have you here. Everybody join us. Barry Kramlich, lead developer of Pigeon Messenger. I did not create the project. I just took it over in January 20.
There we go. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of R.W. Grimm. Take care, folks, and until I see you again. Cheers.